You're listening to the Shady Designs Podcast, the show where you'll discover all the inside tips and stories behind Australia's favorite artists, designers, and experts. Now here's your host, Arif Imran.
Do you have an open plan living and dining room area? Well, in this episode of the Shady Designs Podcast, we answer one of the most commonly asked questions: how do you decorate with lighting solutions an open plan area? It's really common these days to have open plan living areas in your new building, or perhaps you're renovating and you've knocked down some walls to create that spacious area where you can entertain and have lots of people over and look out from the kitchen into your dining area and then on towards your living room. But giving a room like that some personality can be quite tricky. So how do you start? How do you make sure that the space doesn't end up looking like a cavernous, hard area with not much going for it, where the floors are really hard and echoes throughout the walls? How do you make sure that it's not overcluttered and overworked? Well, this is what we're going to be talking about today. Giving your room some style can be pretty hard, but if you know what you're into, then that makes life much easier. For us, it's introducing some really key feature pieces to your area. And that means some ways that you can introduce some color and some style and some form, like with using artworks, wallpapers, having some pendant lighting, or having cushions and side lamps. Rugs are another really excellent way of introducing texture to a room. And then making it work with the homewares around the space. So with these distinct feature pieces, you need to make sure that they work with your existing furniture. The furniture that you've specifically chosen, or maybe that you've got from your old home, and make sure that it works around the context of the space. If you're starting from scratch, then you might want to start with those main pieces, that being the TV cabinet and the couch, and working around that. And so it's just like a painting. It's like the backdrop to the room. Think of it this way: when you've got an open plan living area, you can't close the door and shut off the room. So it's on display all the time. And so that's why it's really important to make it all work together. For example, we had a project for Kerry from Annandale. She had an entertaining area and had a couple of armchairs. And those armchairs were upholstered in a really bright and patterned fabric by Florence Broadhurst. The room was used as a sort of bar area, and her problem was trying to make those two chairs that she'd invested quite a lot in, a lot of time and a lot of money, making it work for the rest of the room. The room itself was a white, hard floors, and a couple of cabinets, and then it adjoined the formal dining area. The problem here was trying to make everything else work with these dominating chairs. And you might find that you've got that issue as well. Maybe you've got an artwork in the room that's got a really heavy print. How do you make that work in the room? Well, one way is to introduce some pattern, or without introducing patterns, you're introducing fabrics with simple textures. So fabrics that don't have too much design in them, but complement the colors that you've already got. And instead of having a pattern, you're using a texture. So you can explore things like silks, you can explore things like cottons, linens, something with a weave or even a velvet could be quite fun. And then making sure that those colors complement, doesn't so much have to match the colors that you've got at the moment, and just work with the pattern in the chair in her example. So what we've done was, instead of using the same pattern, we found another material from the same collection, but from the same family, but in a different sort of color weave. And then it all started to work together. The other project that we had was Jean from Gladesville. She had this quite simple room. It was really, let's be honest, it was, in her words, a boring room. And what she was trying to do was to give it a bit of personality. So we've got the opposite problem of Kerry from Annandale. Kerry had too much personality happening, and so the solution there was to tone it back and really bring in a rug that was quite neutral, lampshades that sat on quite sculptural bases, but the lampshades themselves were very simple, so it meant that the base was really the feature piece. And then an ottoman to sit in the middle of the room in quite a neutral palette. Whereas Jean, with her boring room, in her situation, the front of her house was quite an older style house, where the back of the house was modern and open plan. So sitting at the dining room table, you'd overlook into the living area, where there was a huge blank wall overlooking the bushy trees, where they had quite large windows. And so uninterrupted views of the bush juxtaposed against this very big, very white, naked wall. And so she played with the idea of getting artworks, and the gallery was clever enough to superimpose digitally an image of the artwork in her room. And from that, it gave her an instant impression that the artwork was probably not the way to go. And so she asked for a session in our studio to look over some wallpapers. And we explored the wallpapers, looking at different ways that we could bring that room to life with wallpaper design. The thing that we realized quickly was that the wallpaper would involve putting the wallpaper up and then moving on to the couch, changing up the rug, changing up the cushions, the side lamps, and then looking at the lampshades last. This is normally not the way that we go about it. We normally think, hey, let's look at some feature pieces and then see what works around that. With so many styles of wallpaper available, it's really the last step of the puzzle. The wallpapers can be the last thing. Unless, of course, you fall in love with a wallpaper design, and that is the design that you must have, then you can simply find other pieces to work with that. So, in Jean's case, really, the point is to choose your priority. Is your priority to give the room some personality, or is your priority that you must have a specific design or print? In her case, she wasn't in love with any idea. She wasn't in love with the idea that it must be an artwork. She wasn't in love with the idea that it must be a wallpaper. And what we quickly discovered was the room needed a new lampshade. The room needed some new side lamps, and the room needed some new cushions. So with a new lampshade, it was, and the design we thought would work best would be a feature lampshade. And you might have noticed on our website that we've got the two styles of lampshades. We've got the double-sided looking lampshade, so that's a material on the outside and a material on the inside. Or you've got the lampshade, which is what we call a feature shade, where you've got the prominent patterned fabric on the outside of the shade only, and you can't miss it. By introducing a ceiling pendant in the right size, so a nice large ceiling pendant in a nice and large room, with a pattern that was quite bold and colourful, but because it doesn't occupy the entire wall, it's not overwhelming. And then using some of the offcuts from the lampshade on the cushions, it was able to lift the couch, and we were able to give that room an instant theme, and we didn't have to do too much. So as you sit at the dining table and you look onto the living area, you get to see that the couch is with colour, you've got to see the lampshade, but the lampshade sits in the foreground of that big white wall, and it breaks it up, it gives it its own little pattern. So think about how you can introduce some pattern to your room, and quite often it's going through the fabric books that we've got here in the studio and simply picking out the fabric that you love the most. And by doing that, you get to enjoy a really fun pattern, and it gives you your own sense of personal style. Okay, so let's go back to the beginning. What's the process here when you're trying to decorate a open plan area? Well, I'd like to start with the furniture. Looking at the furniture that you've got. So have you got quite neutral couches or chairs, or have you got something with a really, really bold pattern? and then that's going to dictate on what to do next. If you've got hard floors, polished concrete, floorboard, then the next step really is to get yourself a rug to soften the floor and give that room some coziness. The sideboards and the shelves and the tables are gonna give us a chance to put some side lamps on the area, and it's also going to dictate what kind of style we're into. And here we get to now look at the feature lighting. For your ceiling pendant, did you want that double-sided look, which can be really useful if you've got some dominating colours already, or did you want to have the lampshade itself to be the predominant feature of the room? And then finally, I say let's look at some wallpapers. Wallpapers that you can use with textures, or you might have a wallpaper with a pattern, maybe just a feature wall rather than going all the way around the room. So here's some action steps that you can take. Look at your room. If it's a room that you're refurbing, move the furniture around and see if you can play around with the way that you've laid out the room. If you've got a project and you're still at the drawing or the building stage, then here's where you can start to think about where you're going to place your furniture. If you're refurbing a room that you've already got, this is a big tip: declutter. Get rid of the things that you really don't need and give yourself some space. The next thing is jump onto our website, shadydesigns.com.au, and check out what other people have done and start exploring some fabric ideas. See if there are any fabrics on there that speak to you, or look at the gallery and check out what other people have done and take inspiration from there. Our showroom has a really expansive collection of fabric designs that will suit your style and your budget. And so introducing patterns is going to be an instant way of bringing that room to life and making sure that your big open plan area is somewhere that you can relax with the family and enjoy with friends for years to come. I'm Arif from shadydesigns.com.au. Thanks for listening to this podcast. For more information, you can jump onto shadydesigns.com.au.